Today on Locked On Canadiens, as the Habs fall out of the mix, is it time to press the panic button?
You're Locked On Canadiens, your daily podcast on the Montreal Canadiens, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi there, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Locked On Canadiens. We have a lot to get through today, so let's get started. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. New customers can bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. My name is Laura Sab, also known as the Active Stick, and joining me, as always, is the wonderful Ian Boisvert, also known as Maybe It's Ian. Ian, let me ask you, is it time to hit the panic button on these Habs?
Um, Depends. And I know that's a wishy-washy answer, but panic about what? Panic about their chances this season? Yeah, in a sense, but didn't really think they had very high chances to make the playoffs this year anyway, right? So hitting the panic button on the concept of the entire rebuild? Absolutely not. Right? Like that's not up for debate. The two of the picks that they tanked for aren't even playing yet. So, I think we need to keep. I know people were really excited that this team was back in the mix and playing for playoff positioning potentially, and it felt like every game really mattered. But this is a good reality check that it's just not. That was not really supposed to be the plan this year, right? I mean, as much as they said in the mix and they hoped to be around it, um, I, I don't know how much I'm panicking at this moment. Just as I'm more just disappointed in the hockey that I have to watch, right? Like it's not fun. They got shut out against Minnesota. They get just two in the first period against Anaheim and then completely lay an egg the rest of the game. I'm just kind of I'm the process to which we've gotten to this point has been really hard to watch.
So there are 30 games left in the season for the Habs, in the regular season for the Habs. Right now, they are, depending on which wildcard spot you look at, they are either 5 or 6 points out of a playoff spot, and they've got a few teams ahead of them. I expect that the Canadians aren't going to continue to lose games in the way that they have recently. There were a few games where they played well and they just, luck got the better of them. The bounces didn't go their way. And I think it's totally fair. Like we saw them play really well against a couple of teams. We saw them play well against Minnesota. We saw them play well against New Jersey. So I don't think that necessarily that all hope is lost of being in the mix. A hope of making the playoffs, I think it's a long shot, but it was always going to be that way. There were always going to be 5 or 6 teams looking for one spot, right?
Yeah.
It was, so for me, I think the injuries have caught up with them, but I don't want to discount the good play that they had in, the months of December and January. I don't think that that was a flash in the pan. I don't think that the Canadians are truly bad enough to win 5 games in a row. Sorry, to lose 5 games in a row, not win, lose 5 games in a row. I don't think so. But I do think that it is time to kind of have those conversations and really look at the team and say, okay, are we going to be selling this year? Because this is potentially the last year you're going to be selling. This is potentially the last year you can pick up picks and prospects so that you can make a splash in the summer. And I
Yeah.
think, it's not the end of the world if the Canadians get a high draft pick, a top 10 draft pick, like the higher the better, obviously. It would have been nice to see them in the playoffs. I still think that they need to keep fighting up until the last second. I think they need to play as if they can't just give up. But I do think that they have to ask that question if they're planning to sell or not. Let's talk about the Anaheim game real quick because I want to spend the next couple of segments. We have to do our weekly recap and forecast in this episode because tomorrow we have a special crossover edition with another rebuilding team. All of you know JD Young from Locked On Sharks. We've done tons of crossovers with him in the past, and this will be Ian's first time doing a crossover with JD. We're going to talk about the respective rebuilds, Celebrini, all of that. We're going to preview the game, and hopefully the Montreal Canadiens can get back in the W column against the Sharks. All right, against Anaheim. Started out so well. It
Yeah.
started out so well. And then it all fell apart. How did
Yeah.
it go wrong?
I just think that the Canadians play a style right now that is very easy for other teams to adapt to. When they're forechecking really, really well, other teams are just able to adapt. They're able to adapt and move the puck quicker when it's chipped in. When they're entering the zone on the rush particularly well, now we're going to stack 3 guys on the blue line you're not getting in. I also just think that the Canadiens just like, have they completed a pass that has looked decent outside of goals that were set up? It just seems like everything is in skates, everything misses, like everything's just off. It's just everything's off just slightly, and that's what's causing these games to get to fall out of their hands. I also think that they don't have 4 lines going right now, which is what was really successful for them in the past. I thought the first line was good. I thought the third and fourth lines were okay. The second line we have to talk about. It's a disaster. It's been not very good lately. Line A had 1 shift in the third period. Doc had 1 shift in the last 9 minutes of the third period. That's not a line anymore. It can't be. I understand why it's put together. It's put together that way just because, well, that's what's left of every other line. That's what Marty said when he put that line together. When line A came back in, it was, well, they're sort of just, I like my first line, I like my third line, I like my fourth line. I figure it out, I guess, you guys. And they just haven't. They have not been able to figure it out. They spend entire shifts caved in the defensive zone. They're not strong defensive players, so they have a hard time stopping the defending and then moving the puck on offense. And then even on offense, they're just like, I know Line A, I'm a big Line A booster. Everybody knows this. He's like, at times when he's very nonchalant and it goes well, it's like, man, he looks effortless for him. And then there are times where he looks very nonchalant and it goes poorly, and it just looks like his head's not in it. And I think that's kind of what happened against Anaheim on Sunday afternoon. So that line isn't to blame for all of their problems. It certainly isn't the reason they lost, but it's just not playing well enough for them to succeed.
So I would say maybe 10 days ago, we were praising that second line. But what I want to kind of note, because as I think back, is that whenever we were saying positive things about the second line, we kept talking about them being on the
Yeah.
verge, about to, emerging. Like those were finding its place. Like those were the words we were using. And I think you hit the nail on the head in that the problem is that they're not strong defensively, so they can never get anything going offensively.
Yeah.
And I think, and the problem is, because I was gonna joke, is Emil Heineman holding the glue that holds this team together? I don't, I don't want to overstate his importance, but I think one of the problems is that whether he's in or not, Marty seems very reluctant to mess with any of his other lines. And we kind of understand why. Like, if you break up that second line, that also means you have to break up 3 lines, or at least one of 3 lines that is working. So I totally get it. I don't envy Martin St. Louis' position, but I do really want to really go back to what you were talking about, how the Canadiens play a style of hockey that is really easy for other teams to adapt to. And so in my mind, does that just mean that they are lacking offensive creativity? Is that what you're sort of thinking?
It's part of it, but I think a lot of the time it's, they end the period well, the period goes well for them. They go to the locker room and there's another team who's game planning to beat them. There's another team who's going back, okay, this is what we saw, this is how we'll beat them. And then without fail, that team comes back on the ice and knows how to beat the Montreal Canadiens. That's just that's what we've seen. They've had a really hard time dealing with other teams adapting. Remember when a few episodes ago when Gouli first got hurt, and I said there's a new mantra for this team. It's adapt or die. Well,
They're
right
not
now they're
adapting.
adapting, so they're dying. Like that's what we're seeing. They're not changing the way they're playing. And to be honest, Marty, if you're reluctant to change the lines, too bad. Like they're not. What line is performing? That yes, the first line is kind of performing, but they didn't score. They're not, they're not playing so well that you're like, don't touch it. The team is they're completely losing the reason that they're playing this season, which is to be in the mix. They've completely fallen out of it. You need to start tweaking something.
Yeah, and so here's my thing is that there's no rule that says you can't put those lines back together late in the game once it's back under control. like that,
Yeah.
you're really married to those lines. That's great, but you do have to do a bit of blending. I know fans really hate line blenders, and especially when you don't give them time to click. But at this point, like, you can put those lines back together when you have control.
Yeah.
And you can split them back up apart if the other team takes over. And if you look at the numbers, they actually weren't so bad against Anaheim. They really weren't. Like, Montreal is a better team than Anaheim. I think that's objectively true. I think the problem is that they allowed Anaheim to beat them, and they have to stop allowing this, right? This is the same thing that we were saying earlier in the season. You have to have that killer instinct. You have to keep your foot on their necks or whatever. Like, I truly don't feel that the Canadiens are incapable of beating a team like Anaheim. I truly feel that the Montreal Canadiens allowed Anaheim back into that game very easily. They held the door open and Anaheim waltzed in. So
Yeah.
we're going to talk about the weekly recap in our next segment. And we're going to ask ourselves the question, can they turn it around when we do the weekly forecast a little bit later in the segment? Because this is the last week before the Four Nations break. We've got a lot of games to get through, and let's do that next. Super Bowl 59 is here. One game, two teams, endless possibilities. And there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action. With live betting all game long, you can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. The live betting feature lets you stay involved no matter what happens on the field, and the app is super easy to navigate. Plus, knowing that you can place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in bonus bets for the Super Bowl, that's the icing on the cake. Download the app or head to fanduel.com to get started. Bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. That's fanduel.com. Bet with FanDuel, official partner of Super Bowl 59. All right. It is time to talk about the weekly recap. The Canadiens won no games this week, all losses, but was it really as bad as we thought?
It's tough to say. I thought, look, they had a 3-game homestand and lost all of them, right? We talked about how this team had been traveling so much, and the schedule is brutal. Okay, here's 3 at home, dropped all of them, picked up 1 point in the overtime against New Jersey. They were never really close in that Jets game. The Wild game was close. They just didn't get the bounces that they needed. The Anaheim game, I know you said that Anaheim they're not as good of a team as Montreal. Just like the roster building, they're not at the same points in their rebuilds. It shouldn't make sense that it should make sense that that's the case. However, like, Montreal did not play. I don't think they played to their ability. They did not play well enough for me to let them off the hook for anything. And the other part of this is I see people still complaining about the officiating, which was a problem the rest of the week because they just didn't get any power plays. They got a bunch on Sunday, and they did nothing with it. Yes, they got the one Dvorak goal with like seconds left in that second unit, but the first unit is entirely dysfunctional right now. It does not work. That's something that I kind of want to see them tweak in a way. I think it's time to look at other options on that power play, but definitely not a good week. It's what's terrible is that it seems like, a month's worth of work was torn down in 6 days, which is just how it goes when you're a team on the bubble and there are 8 other teams on the bubble, right? Those other teams, Columbus, Ottawa, they haven't had those issues. They haven't had those losing streaks. They may get them later on, right? Every team goes through slumps, but Montreal is the only one going through that out of those bubble teams right now. So that's why you're seeing this. Them in Boston. Boston's not playing particularly well either, but we're kind of expecting them to fall off at this point. So like it was not a good week. Like, it was a really, really challenging week for this team. And I really worry that the goalie injury is going to have the same effect that the Doc injury did last year, where everyone just kind of, loses whatever mental progress they had made to that point.
Yeah. And I think this is something that, honestly, from my perspective, the coaching staff and the front office staff can fix. right?
Yeah.
There's a lot that we put on the players. There's a lot we talk about how we talk about execution. But when you're talking about allowing one injury to deflate, like that's a mentality thing. Where does the mentality come from? It doesn't just come from the players. It comes from the organization. It comes from the coaching staff. Go back to that playing for each other feeling that you had. Or even
Mhm.
if you're Marty and he says he doesn't want them to play for him, do something. Make them play for you, right?
Mhm.
Give them that thing to hang on to, because their faith in themselves is so shattered, and it shouldn't be. Like they have to be able to conjure up what allowed them to beat four, in a row. I think it was the last four Stanley Cup champs, or in a very rapid succession.
Mhm.
So I don't know necessarily that the Canadians aren't going to stay in the bubble, because all it takes is one team to have a little bit of a losing streak, right? Like look at how we wrote off Ottawa, we wrote off Detroit, and now they're back, right? I don't necessarily think that this is the end of the line. I think we're still going to continue to be in the mix. It's just that the Canadians need to get right. To me, Anaheim was supposed to be their get right game. They
Yeah.
squandered that opportunity, but that does not mean that you have to do that against the Sharks too. And the Sharks, you have to take them seriously. Yes, they're a bottom feeding team, but you have to take them seriously because they're exciting, they're fun. They have Macklin Celebrini. They've got lots of good players, and historically, this is the kind of team Montreal will face plant against. And for
Yeah.
me, I hope that face planting happened against Anaheim and it's out of the way, because we can't watch too many more games like this. Like this, the last month and a half to 2 months cannot be a flash in the pan. It has to be the direction the Canadians are going in. So if they want to lose 5 games in a row and then put efforts like that together again, I'm all for it. If Kent Hughes wants to go out and make a trade and shake things up, I'm all for it. I actually want to see that right now. I didn't
Yeah.
want to see it before because there were so many players I didn't want to see them part with.
Yeah.
But I think, overall, he needs to do something to inject some energy into this lineup, because they're not even panicking. That's the thing. If they were panicking, it would be different. They just look listless. They look like they're out of ideas, and they need to, do something new. They need to do something different. They need to do something big, like something bold, whatever it is, and we saw putting Arbor up with oh my god.
Lane Hudson.
I keep forgetting. How can I forget Lane Hudson? How can I forget like
The the
the
D
shining
pairs were
star?
the D pairs were optional.
Yeah.
They changed. It seemed like especially early on in the game,
Yeah.
it was just 6 guys just popping on and off the ice. It didn't really look like there was much there to go
Yeah.
by.
Yeah.
And to your point, like I don't think that the last 5 games undoes everything that we learned about this team going into it. What I've come to what I've come to at the end of this is that version of the team that was beating Tampa and Florida and Vegas and all those guys, that is right now when everything is going really well for this team, right? When we're not talking about them not getting the bounces, we're not talking about them not scoring on the power play. Like that, when that team was doing all of those things, we saw the result of it, right? And that was when we finally had everybody back healthy. All of the pairs and lines were the same for weeks. There was regularity there, and now we've started to just lose guys a little bit. We've lost a fourth liner who is proving to be far more important to this team than maybe we thought. And Caden Gooley, his absence cannot be understated here. I will say one last thing about the Anaheim game to harp on a point that I made, very early on when I first started on this show, which is that you win the game at 5-on-5 and you lose it on the power play. Well, Anaheim won the game at 5-on-5. It was 3-0 goals. So Montreal, we harp on the special teams power plays not working. Blah. They scored a power play goal. They scored a penalty killing. They scored a shorthanded goal, and it still wasn't enough because they could not score at even strength. So I posted this after the game. I think the most annoying thing right now with the Canadians is that everyone has a different idea of what's wrong and none of them are wrong. It's just we've all focused on different parts and there's a lot of stuff that's not going the way it should.
Absolutely. Um, and I think we're not gonna, be in despair just yet. I keep saying this. I've been saying this since the first time they lost in this losing streak. we're not going to despair just yet. We're not going to despair at the loss of Kane Gooley. We're going to hold out hope because this is the last week before the Four Nations break, and lots of things can happen during and after that break. And we're going to talk about the week coming up in just a moment. All right, Udi Nation, it is back. As you can see, it's back on the occasion of our West Coast road trip because my lovely co-host and I will be staying up until butt o'clock to get you the game recaps for these games. The Habs better win at least one of them, but we will be talking about them. There are 4 games this week. The schedule is a little bit crazy because it's Super Bowl weekend. Is just before the Four Nations break, et cetera, et cetera. So first up, we've got back-to-backs Tuesday night in San Jose, Wednesday night in Los Angeles, and then the Canadiens are back here for the Super Bowl special, which is New Jersey on Saturday. I believe we're going to be on Game Over that Saturday, right?
Yep.
And now I can't remember who the other
Tampa on Sunday.
Tampa on Sunday. Which, by the way, Tampa, I hold you completely responsible for the fact that the Ottawa Senators are in the 3rd playoff spot. Go and look at what you did. Go think about what you did. All right.
Yeah.
What are the keys to the San Jose game?
They have to play more than 20 minutes. They have to play more than one period. They have to have 4 lines that they can roll out there. We need to see a bounce back from that second line. We need to see Patrick Laine and Kirby Dach more engaged. Shockingly, I thought Newhook was really good the last few days, especially on the power play. He's the only one who's able to enter the zone, and that's why I'm kind of like, maybe move Laine back down to power play 2 and let Newhook just carry the mail on the first power play. What could happen? Well, you don't score. You're not doing it now. You might as well change something. So yeah, I mean that San Jose game, I'd say it was a trap game, but it can't be because this last one was right. The Anaheim game was the trap game. You can't get trapped twice in a row. Like that's, if they lose again, that's kind of just who they are at this point. And I'm kind of worried about that being the case. Montreal does not play very well in San Jose. They've struggled in that building historically. I really, it's funny looking at the week. I like their chances most against Tampa Bay. Like, that's not good.
And then they have Los Angeles on Wednesday night, again at butt o'clock. We will be there for you with a morning episode. That is how much we love you, listeners. Also, we have to do it. Otherwise, we get fired.
So if you want to go to sleep, go to sleep. We'll recap it in the morning.
Yes. All right. So, what are the keys against LA? To me, LA is the kind of team that's like a Vegas. It's like a Colorado. It's a team that is getting ready for a long playoff run. Yeah. I don't want to say getting ready to win another Stanley Cup. I'm going to say the team is getting ready for a long playoff run. That's where they're at right now. That's their caliber. They're in win now mode, as you put it last week. Mm-hmm. So what do you do in Los Angeles other than scout potential trading targets?
Montreal has struggled to score against the Kings in recent memory. I think they were shut out twice in a row against the Kings, and then the last time I think they scored once, if I remember correctly. I'm just cycling back to see if I can find an example of that. Yes, 4-1 loss back in October to the LA Kings. They've struggled against these Western teams for a long time. Second half of a back-to-back West Coast, it just seems like, I don't want to say a scheduled loss, but like it doesn't feel good looking at that game. And you have to think that Dobish is getting one of those. Which one would you start Dobish in, the San Jose game or the LA game?
I'm going to say something controversial.
Mm-hmm.
The LA game.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same way. Let Montembeault try to bounce, and Montembeault wasn't bad against the Ducks by any stretch.
No.
But let Montembeault try to get back in the win column against the Sharks.
Yeah.
And then I just think that Dobish, if he's under fire, he's the better goalie that I would rather have. He's the goalie that I would rather see face more shots at this point than Sam Montembeault. So yeah. And then there's another backup another back-to-back on the weekend where you have to imagine we're seeing both of those guys.
Yeah.
I would imagine that the Devils get Dobish and that or maybe the Devils get Montembeault because he was Dobish. They got Dobish last time and beat him.
Also, it's Saturday.
Yeah, it's Saturday afternoon. Does that matter?
Honestly, I don't know. I mean, like that's the weekend that all the families go, right? Like it's not a
Right.
late night game. It's like it's very geared towards families. I think some of the marketing and the in-game stuff is also geared towards families. So I don't know if the rules change for that. I would still imagine that you get Montembeault um against New Jersey and Dobish against Tampa. Also
Yeah.
because Dobish was, he didn't get Tampa last time, he got Florida. So I feel like you mix it up. That's what I'm seeing. That's what
Yeah.
I'm predicting
And
this
that
time
lets
around.
Montembeault get ready for Four Nations, right? Like he
Yeah.
doesn't play that last game immediately before going.
Yeah.
Now that that's the Canadiens' prerogative, they don't have to do that if they don't want to, but I would imagine they'd want to help their player out more than anything.
Yeah.
The Devils game, it was close. It was close last time, despite the fact that Montreal did not have their A game. Um, they need to capitalize. They need to capitalize on their chances. They need to stop. They need to make fewer mistakes. That was one of the worst games we've seen from Mike Matheson, which
We
led them to
need
change the defense pairings. And then Caden Gooley got injured the very next game, and we kind of just now they've just been in chaos since then. So yeah, just they need to just do a better job of executing and finishing games, finishing periods. They've just had a hard time stringing one segment of play into another, which I know sounds simple, but that's the reality of this team right now. They're just really having a hard time doing that.
Yeah, and I would not disagree. Before we talk about Tampa in a second, I forgot about our mic meter. We have a mic meter,
Yeah.
and it goes from tragic to magic. So I think in today's Anaheim game, Ian, you said that he was around a 4,
Yeah, I would
which
say full.
means yeah, he
He's
wasn't
closer to
magic.
magic than tragic.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he wasn't fully magic, but he
No.
did not make us want to cry,
Yeah.
um, or throw him out a window, which we would never do because we don't do violence on this show.
Yeah.
All
No,
right,
not at all.
Tampa Bay. Okay, to me, I think you said Tampa's probably the most winnable game out of the bunch.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. I mean, look, I almost called him Kovalchuk.
Kucherov.
Kucherov. Kucherov is gonna score. Get used to it. That's just the reality of that player in this city. He's gonna score a goal in that game. So
In many cities, to be fair.
yes, absolutely. He's like
Many fan
I
bases feel the same way about him.
yeah, he's third in points, right? He's an incredible player. I hate him a lot. But like if the Canadians can overcome that, like they have in the past, they've played Tampa twice this year and beaten them both times, which
Yes.
is kind of astounding. But that they've been good against this team this year. It's kind of funny how like that might be their get right game at the end of this week.
That would
Um,
be funny.
yeah, that Tampa is your get right game. Montreal has also just played everybody in their division a little bit better this year.
Yes. Except for Ottawa, apparently. No.
No, we've only played Ottawa once and they beat them. That's it.
I think it's Toronto that the Canadians can't beat.
Toronto. Yeah, they're 1-2 against Toronto
Yeah,
this year. They beat them
because
in
it's
the
not the
opener.
playoffs.
Right,
Um,
exactly.
all right. Before we move on to trivia, I have a question for you.
Sure.
If Kucherov was on your team,
Mm,
if he was a Montreal Canadian, would you defend him?
no, no. I mean, people heard us when Arbor Xhekaj was doing all that dumb stuff in the preseason, and we were none too pleased with him doing that.
Yeah.
There was no defense of him in what he was doing. So I mean, you know, I would like to have him for the offense, but I think on a team like Montreal that's not playing particularly well, he would be a nightmare to have
Yeah.
around because his body language is so bad when things don't go the right way. And he's like, oh, he's throwing his shoulders and rolling his eyes and smacking his stick. Like he turns into a big baby when things don't go well. So I wouldn't. This isn't what you asked, but like I wouldn't give anything up to have him on this team currently. I don't think that makes a lot of sense.
One final question. Sorry, I keep saying one
Yeah.
question, one question, one question. 4 games, 8 points. Do you think they get 4?
I'd be thrilled with 3 games. I'd be thrilled if
3
they took
points.
6 of 8.
Oh, okay.
I
6
they
points.
they
3
need
games.
look, they
Okay.
need to.
Yes.
This is it.
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
if you want to be in the mix on the other side of the Four Nations, 6 of 8 here is imperative. You cannot
Yeah.
leave with fewer than that.
Yes. So 2 overtime losses and 2 wins.
Yeah, there you go.
That's what you get,
Good for me.
Montreal Canadiens.
Good
That
for
is
me.
your assignment.
Yeah.
All right, let's do our trivia. I completely forgot the question, but I feel like I know what the answer is.
Yeah, it was what goalie has given up the most goals against the Montreal Canadiens in history, in
Okay.
NHL history. Do you remember who it was?
Yes, I remember who it was, but I just want everyone to know that I didn't guess this or know it.
Yeah,
Ian had to tell it to me. The answer is Terry Sawchuk.
it is Terry Sawchuk. 522 goals the Canadiens scored on a very good goalie in Terry
Yeah,
Sawchuk. So just kind of that was the matchup, right? It was Montreal, Toronto forever.
yeah.
And those were excellent Canadiens teams. So of course that was going to happen. I stuck with goaltending for today's question. Which Habs goalie gave up the most goals in a single season, and what season was it? If you have the answer, put it in the comments down below. Send it to us via email, lockedoncanadiens@gmail.com. We'll shout you out on the next episode of the show.
I feel like this is a question where somebody once told me the answer and it was quite surprising.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I feel like when somebody told me this piece of trivia a long time ago, I was like shocked by it. All right,
Yeah.
listeners, it's up to you to guess, and you can leave your guess in our YouTube comments. You can also send them to us via email at lockedoncanadiens@gmail.com. You can send them to us on Instagram. We are Locked On Canadiens on Instagram. You can send them to us on Blue Sky. We are Locked On Canadiens on Blue Sky. You can also send them to us or comment them on TikTok. We are Locked On Canadiens on TikTok. As for myself, you'll find me at The Active Stick. For Ian, you will find him at Maybe It's Ian. Do not forget that at the end of this week on Saturday, we will be on Game Over. But in the meantime, we've got plenty of episodes, including one with JD Young tomorrow of Locked On Sharks tomorrow. And we will see you then.